So next up, we have Bex, who is a first-year PhD student at the University of Winchester in the Department of Philosophy, Religions, and Liberal Arts. And they will be giving their paper on A Queer Matter, an exploration into the implications new materialism holds for our understanding of matter and meaning as it relates to non-binary gender identities. Take it away.
Right, it's a bit of a mouthful of a title. Apologies for that. And I'd just like to thank Amy and Joanna for their organisation of this symposium, and just express my admiration for the range of engaging and provocative presentations today. So I'm as Joanna said, I'm a first-year PhD student within the Department of Philosophy, Religion, and Liberal Arts, but specifically situated within the Liberal Arts team. And it's the interdisciplinary education that I received there that has had a huge impact and influence on my work and thinking. And it was through that education that I first became acquainted with Karen Barad's work and new materialism as well. Firstly, I wish to preface my piece by stating that though it may be referred to as new materialism, this is in no way in ignorance of the rich materialist tradition from which it finds its inspiration. In this regard, the new materialism to which I refer may be thought of as a renewed materialism, as Kuhl and Frost declare in their text. In a similar manner, I do not wish to suggest that the queer interactions to which this essay concerns itself are somehow a vast departure from that which came before. And I say this to disrupt both the logic of progression and the logic of disruption, which is a logic that assumes that something either needs or does not need to be left behind in order for progress to be made. We are ever indebted to those who came before us and ever responsible to those who will follow. And I believe that new materialism offers an approach that fully embodies this responsibility, at the same time queering such normative notions of linearity, agency, and matter, whilst all the while in awareness of the material discursive entanglements that allow us to do so in the first place. So new materialism in a general sense is a part of a shift in theory and practice permeating multiple disciplines and studies that aims to attend to the material reality of our existence. This is to matter, to material bodies, both human and non-human, to the agency of that matter, and to the nature of becoming. So those who pursued this material turn did so in response to what they perceived to be an overwhelming dominance of the linguistic and cultural social constructionism of the latter half of the 20th century, which privileged language over that of ontology and the human over that of the non-human. The heterogeneous nature that characterizes new materialist approaches may be due in large part to the numerous disciplines from which it draws its inspiration, specifically that of feminist science studies, posthumanism, queer theory, post-structuralism, physics, and philosophy, though its application has been widely utilized beyond these fields to great effect as well. So the new materialist approach that I focus on today, and will be the focus of my PhD, is that of Karen Barad. So Barad is a quantum physicist and a feminist philosopher who employs the use of Niels Bohr's philosophy physics as the foundation of their agential realist account of reality. And it's an account that's meticulously outlined in their text, Meeting the Universe Halfway, which I highly recommend. So Barad builds upon the quantum physics of Niels Bohr, which is an approach that demonstrates the queer, and that's Barad's use, not Bohr's, and indeterminate nature of atomic behavior. So for Barad, the quantum indeterminacy that Bohr's interpretation favors relates to the interaction of apparatus, phenomena, and the measurements within that specific experimental context. So for Barad, and this is how their words, the measurement apparatus is the condition of the possibility for determinate meaning for the concept in question. Now, what this means is that the values themselves do not pre-exist the specific experimental context. Or put another way, as Sauzet does, the thing that we research is enacted in the entanglement of the way we research it. So ultimately, and in the truest sense, we are part of that nature that we seek to understand. So we, as human beings, do not exist in privileged externality to the world that we inhabit. We do not engage with the world as pre-existing subjects, but as subjects interactively co-constituted through the material discursive practices we engage in. So the implications of such a statement are manifold, particularly for our understanding of the presumed boundaries between research and researcher. And I know this is a topic that others presenters have touched upon throughout the day. And a key feature of this new materialism that I believe has particular resonance for queer theory, transgender studies, post-colonial studies, to name but a few, but also for higher education more generally as well. This is because it speaks to what I'd argue is the unavoidable entanglement of material discursive practices that shift the objective referent away from the primacy of the human, away from that idealized humanist man, to one that puts the loci of activity firmly within the phenomena. So in doing so, new materialism presents an opportunity for us to think of causation in far more complex terms that recognizes that phenomena are caught in a multitude of interlocking systems. So when we put this in the context of queer theory and gender studies, transgender studies, post-colonial studies and the like, the creative dialogues and potentialities that emerge through such an interaction presents us with a perspective and a methodology that I believe resonates with the efforts in these areas of study to dislodge and disrupt those cemented dichotomies and hierarchies that position culture over nature, mind over body, and the rational human above all else. So what Barad's agential realist approach provides is a perspective that not only attends to the focus or object of the research we enact, but also to the epistemological framework that is materially entangled with the object of that research. So there is an accountability to the implicated existence we enact with every interaction, interactions that include that of phenomena and apparatus and the exchanges therein. Consequently, for Barad, the ethicality of such interactions is implicit due to the implicated existence through which we emerge. So for Barad, the ethicality of such an approach is precisely about the responsibility and accountability for the lively relationalities of becoming of which we are a part. So in this regard, there's an undeniable responsibility bound up within Barad's agential realism, because it takes seriously a shape of subjectivity that is not a matter of individuality, but a relation of responsibility to the other. I say that in air quotes. Moreover, these others, so to speak, cannot be regarded in the same manner as the humanist principle of a distinct exterior entity, because ultimately, by new materialism's view, the notion of they and we are co-constituted and entangled through the very cuts we help to enact. So you may be wondering at this point what this has to do with non-binary identities, or perhaps questioning, as other theorists have, whether posthumanism and new materialism are just a white middle-class Western location for those who can afford to leave the question of race and power and identity and subjectivity behind. So in this regard, there exists a responsibility in the posthuman sense to challenge any seemingly universalizing gestures that the new materialist episteme may appear to suggest. So it's a fundamental aspect of keeping the methodology by which we research just as accountable to the perceived object of our research as we are to the object itself. Ultimately, the conditions of the possibility of our research are as crucial as the object to which we direct that research. Hence, the new materialist understanding of the interactive entanglement between phenomena and apparatus is the very feature by which I believe this accountability materially manifests. Consequently, the new materialist methodology is not an attempt to get beyond the categories of race or gender, but rather a means by which to reconfigure our understanding of the ways in which our interactions enact and reproduce all manner of boundary-making practices. So the realities of these boundary-making practices are what brought me to the question of non-binary identities and experiences and their potential interaction with new materialism. So I chose to anchor my presentation within the context of non-binary gender experience as just one way of demonstrating new materialism's creative and disruptive potential for a multitude of reasons, not least in part due to my own personal interaction with new materialism as a non-binary person and the resonance I felt in the vast material discursive possibilities that I perceived therein, but also to what I perceived as a critical and exciting contradiction present at the intersection of human identity and that of a theory that fundamentally disrupts the primacy of the human. It's a theory that shifts our understanding of the human from the principal agent to, as Ernst puts it, just one curious entity between an indefinite number of others. In this regard, to highlight a specifically human experience and entangle that with a theory that ultimately undermines the presumed primacy of human subjectivity seems like a wholly paradoxical endeavor. And yet, it is precisely within that contradiction that I believe presents us with a renewed path towards reconfiguring normative gender relations in the post-humanist landscape. It is this mutual transgression, on the one hand, the transgression of normative gender identities, and on the other hand, the transgression of hierarchical spheres of being, that reveals the apparatic scythe by which we may analyze the very ontological and epistemological structures that restrict our material discursive boundaries in the first place, and allow for, in the diffractive engagement of their mutual transgression, in Barad's words, ever more inventive provocations. As a consequence of this diffractive material engagement, as a consequence of this diffractive material discursive engagement, the interaction of these interdisciplinary spheres discloses a feminist new materialism that provides the opportunity for a non-binary body politics that, in Van der Thuen's words, does not adhere to an essential body, yet also allows for differentiation without reinforcing of hierarchies that position one particular material configuration over that of another. And it also attends to the framework or apparatus that would allow such hierarchies to retain the primacy over knowledge in the first place. Consequently, when we shift the normative parameters of research and researcher, and when we attend to the preconceived boundaries between apparatus and phenomena, when we provoke opportunities to reconfigure hierarchical forms of knowledge production and acknowledge the material discursive nature of existence, what emerges is an exciting, disruptive, complex structure of interacting agencies. These interacting agencies that broaden and enrich the scope of our theoretical and practical horizons. So the non-binary experience and perspective is but one way among innumerable ones available to work through the potentiality that new materialism holds. Working through the complexities and contradictions that lie at the meeting of identity and that of the decentered human is an important and necessary task in the reorientation of the human in the post-humanist world. Finding ways in which to elucidate the shape of the human without its anthropocentrism, yet with the accountability to the specificities of the entangled nature of identity. The first step then in the new materialist sense is for us to meet the universe halfway. For it is in such an act that we, in Barad's words, begin to take responsibility for the role that we play in the world's differential becoming. Thank you.
Well, thank you for